I could listen to that for a while. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Friday, Yom Shishi. A good and Erev Shabbos to you, my holy sisters and brothers. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Friday? Yehud in South Carolina, Bell in Florida, Bill in Missouri, Renee in Indiana, Sharon in New Jersey, Guy in Ohio, Joe in the Inland Empire, Lorraine in Texas, Paul in the Great Northwest, Renee, where's Gordo from Scotland? We noticed. Marjorie in Georgia, Spencer in Connecticut, Joseph in Nevada, Aoife in Florida, Mickey in New Jersey. Welcome, everybody. Great to have you with us. Our daf today, is page 58 here in Tractate Bava Basra, the 23rd volume of the Talmud. We are picking this up. Wait a minute. We are picking this up near the bottom of page 57b, continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 6 here in chapter 3, discussing what kinds of actions can create a presumption of ownership in a piece of property. Somebody was using it for 3 years. Well, what do we mean by using it? That's what the Mishnah is about. But we got into a digression once we were learning some teachings that Rabbi Yochanan learned from Rabbi Bena'a. So we're just going to continue with some other things that Rabbi Yochanan learned from Rabbi Bena'a, or Bena'a. Bena'a. Some would say Benai, but it's more Bena'a. So Rabbi Yochanan asked Rabbi Bena'a, how should the garment of a Torah scholar worn under his clothes be fashioned? And he replied, he can wear any garment long enough that his flesh is not visible from beneath it. And Rabbi Yochanan asked, how should the cloak of a Torah scholar be fashioned? And he replied, he can wear any garment long enough that a handbreadth of his garment worn under his clothes is not visible from beneath it, right? So, we're not so familiar with the kinds of clothes that they were wearing. I mean, you and me personally, historians know, but we're certainly getting the sense that a Torah scholar should be dressed modestly. I'm embarrassed. I probably should not be showing my arms. I should be dressed more modestly, less flesh, even as a male. And the cloak should cover the garment, right? So not just a shirt. I mean, I would say that the modern equivalent is probably what you would think, that a Torah scholar is wearing a black suit and a white shirt. Rabbi Yochanan asked, and how should the table of a Torah scholar appear? And he replied, but I'm not a Torah scholar. I'm just your friendly neighborhood accidental Talmudist. But still, we should aspire to dress maybe more appropriately. Okay, so how should the table of a Torah scholar appear? And he replied, 2/3 of the table is covered with a cloth, and 1/3 is uncovered. And upon that third are dishes and vegetables, and its ring, which is used to hang the table on the wall, should be positioned on the outside, not on the side that faces the one who is eating. Now, it seems now when they're talking about these tables, they're talking about individual tables. This is very interesting. So a meal, definitely in parts of the world, if not most parts of the world, in the ancient world, where we're talking about Jewish communities, it's not like the modern world, right? Where we all have that picture of the dinner table, the family dinner table, and everyone sits around the table. We have the meal at the dinner table. We have a beautiful Shabbos meal. If you're not Jewish, you're thinking a Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving dinner, right? A big table, tablecloth, all the fixings and trimmings. But much more common in the ancient world, assuming people were sitting on chairs and benches, is that each individual had his own table, right? So I think people aren't doing this so much anymore, but I do remember in my house in the 1970s that we had like TV tables. Does anybody remember TV tables? Right, so it was a folding table. Each person had an individual table, probably kind of like this, right? The size of like a nice big tray. And the legs would fold underneath, and we'd have like a stand, and there were 4 of these TV tables on the stand. And then each person would have his individual table, and they didn't have folding legs. So the legs were sort of permanently on these small tables, but the tables had a ring on the side and there was a hook on the wall, so they could suspend these small tables up on the wall and not use up valuable floor space during the day. So we're talking about, just think the individual TV table type of things, but they're not foldable, so they're suspended from a ring that's on the edge of the table and gets hung on that hook on the wall. And that ring is going to be important. So what about this? So how should the table of a Torah scholar appear, right? This like individual table. 2/3 of it is covered with a cloth and 1/3 is uncovered. Now that cloth acts as both a table covering for part of that table and as the napkin to wipe your hands on it. And 1/3 is uncovered so that you don't soil the cloth. And upon the third, on that third, the uncovered third, this is where the dishes and vegetables are. And its ring that's on the side should be on the outside, meaning not on the side that faces the one who is eating. So the Gemara asks, but isn't it taught in a Baraisa that its ring should be positioned on the inside? So the Gemara answers that this ring on the edge of the table, this is not difficult. This Baraisa which states that its ring should be positioned on the outside. So this is referring to where there's a child who may play with the ring and overturn the table. So we don't want the ring on, if there's a child who might pull the ring and, pull down the table with all the food on it, then the ring should be toward the person dining and away from the child. And that Baraisa, which states that the ring should be positioned on the inside, meaning I guess on the outside of the table, away from the diner, is where there is no child present. And if you wish, say instead that both this and that refer to a case where there is no child present, and still the contradiction is not difficult, because this Baraisa which states that the ring should be positioned on the inside is referring to a case where there is an attendant who may bump into the ring when he's walking around bringing people their food, while that Baraisa which states that the ring should be positioned on the outside is referring to a case where there is no attendant, and then we're going to be more cognizant of the comfort of the person dining. Right? So you can put your own comfort, you can think of your own comfort in terms of that ring, but that only extends so far as we're going to be smart and not put it on the outside where the child might pull it over, and we're going to be polite and thoughtful and mindful of the attendant who's bringing people their food and who might bump into the ring. And if you wish... And if you wish, say instead that both this and that refer to a case where there is an attendant, and still it is not difficult. One Baraisa where the ring is positioned on the outside, this is referring to where the meal is eaten during the day when there's plenty of light, and the attendant who's walking around will see that ring protruding from the edge of the table. And the other Baraisa where it says it should be on the inside, this is when somebody's eating at night, there's less light in the house, and the attendant is more likely to bump into that protruding ring. Now the Gemara continues, all of the above is referring to the table of a Torah scholar, but the table of an ignoramus, an Am Haaretz, is similar to a bonfire, where the fire is in the center and the pots surround it. And similarly, the table of an ignoramus is arranged with the food in the center and surrounded by plates, right? That's the way he's going to do it. I think a nice takeaway from this is that if you are growing in wisdom and you're growing in religiosity, you're growing in faith, you're growing in knowledge of the tradition, of scripture, of the oral Torah, the written Torah, etc., you shouldn't only be growing in terms of what information your mind contains, you should also be growing in terms of refinement. You should become a person with greater manners, a person who eats with greater delicacy, a person who arranges his table, his bed, his clothing, just so. Rabbi Yochanan asked, how should the bed of Torah scholars be kept? And he replied, it is acceptable as long as there is nothing except sandals beneath it during the summer and shoes beneath it during the rainy season, i.e. the winter. Whereas the bed of an ignoramus is similar to a cluttered storehouse, as he keeps a wide array of items beneath it. Storage beneath your bed, not such a good thing. Better it should be empty, nice empty space, and that sense of sleeping over an uncluttered area perhaps will add to the peace of your sleep. New subject, and we are on page 58a. Having mentioned Rabbi Bena'a, the Gemara relates an incident in which he was involved. Right, so further digressions, incidents involving Rabbi Bena'a, and this is going to take us to the end of the discussion of Mishna number 6. Very colorful incidents involving Rabbi Bena'a. So the Gemara relates an incident. Rabbi Bena'a was marking burial caves for the purpose of helping to prevent the contracting of mace tuma, right? Tuma mace, in other words, ritual impurity of a corpse. In other words, you have to know where graves are and where burial caves are, especially caves that are beneath the ground, because if you walk over a grave, so then you can contract tuma of a corpse, ritual impurity of a corpse, and you would have to go through a purification before you could enter the holy temple. Okay, so he was marking burial caves for the purpose of helping to prevent the contracting ritual impurity. When he arrived at the cave of Avraham, our ancestor Abraham. Where is Abraham buried? Alongside Sarah, and they are alongside Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and Leah. And you know who else is in that place? Adam and Eve. And what is that place? That's the cave of Machpelah in what is now called Hebron, right? Hebron. A place where there are not so many Jews, though there is a yeshiva. That is definitely a place it's one of the holy cities, according to Jewish law, of Israel. But Hebron is by far majority Arab population. And there have been a lot of incidents associated with Hebron. It's a long time ago, but of course, anything in the last, 1 century, 5 centuries, all of that is modern history, according to Jewish history. But there was a famous massacre of Jews by the Arabs. I believe it was in 1929, before the state of Israel was created. But at any rate, Hebron. And when you go tour around Israel, when there's relative peace and you've got the right tour guide, then you can go to the cave of the Patriarchs. We've made that trip. It's a very holy and inspiring place. Okay, so this is where he was. He was, marking burial caves. So when he arrived at the cave of Abraham, he encountered Eliezer. Eliezer, not Rabbi Eliezer, but Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, the same servant who Abraham asked him, go find a wife for my son Isaac, and Eliezer brought back Rebekah. Right, so Eliezer, who has obviously been, had been dead for, at the time that Rabbi Bena'a is walking around, 1,500 years at least. So Rabbi Bena'a encounters Eliezer, the soul of Eliezer, who is the servant of Abraham. And Eliezer was standing before the entrance of the cave. In other words, he's still serving Abraham in the next world. So Rabbi Bena'a said to him, what is Abraham doing at this moment? And Eliezer answered, he is lying in the arms of Sarah, and she is examining his head. These are obviously very mystical, cryptic teachings. We're not sure exactly what that means. Lying in each other's arms in the world of souls. What does that look like, feel like? I mean, we leave our bodies behind. Do we retain the form of our bodies when we pass into the world of souls? That's not something our tradition really speaks to. We know our souls go there, but what it's like there, hard to know. But at any rate, Eliezer said to Abraham that Abraham is lying in the arms of Sarah, and she is examining his head. So presumably he still has the form of a human body that has arms and a head. So Rabbi Bena'a said to him, go tell him that Bena'a is standing at the entrance so that he should assume an appropriate position to receive a visitor. And Eliezer said to him, let Rabbi Bena'a enter, since it is known that there is no evil inclination in this higher world. So it is not inappropriate for Rabbi Bena'a to see Abraham and Sarah in that position. And he entered, he examined the cave in order to measure it, and he exited. The story does not have further explanation with regard to Abraham and Sarah. But he was not done measuring the burial caves. So when Rabbi Bena'a arrived at the cave of Adam Rishon, right, Adam, that's in Adam and Eve, who was buried in the same area, a divine voice emerged and said, you gazed upon the likeness of my image. So here, God, who is obviously not corporeal, but there is some kind of a divine presence that God manifests at times for our benefit. And the Bible says, right, that man was created in the image and likeness of God. What does that mean? We don't know, right? We don't know, but there's something about the form of a human that is suggestive of some aspect of the divine presence. And sort of the further back you go, I mean, it's sort of like the most similar that a human was to the divine presence was Adam, right? Who was an incredibly beautiful, handsome individual, as we're going to hear. So now that Rabbi Bena'a is walking around this cave, this divine voice emerges and says that you gazed upon the likeness of my image, meaning you saw Abraham. And Abraham is similar to Adam. Says the divine voice, do not gaze upon my image itself, meaning Adam. You looked at Abraham, okay? You're allowed to do that, but you're not allowed to look at Adam, right? So Adam, and we're not talking here about bones. So there's some kind of a manifestation of Adam's, of his form, of his image, that is visible in this cave. So so there's in the same way that our tradition teaches that there is some small aspect of a soul that remains in the grave, even when the soul goes to the world of souls. Some manifestation, some small portion of that soul remains at the grave. And on the yard site, right, on the annual anniversary of the date when a soul left this world, a little bit more of that soul returns to the grave. Okay, and so likewise, there's some aspect of Abraham and of Adam that is there and is visible, I guess, to somebody who is as tuned in to the higher spiritual world, somebody who's able to, see these spiritual manifestations that maybe other people couldn't see. So Rabbi Bena'a somehow saw this manifestation of Abraham, and now he's being told, well, since you're one who can see, you could also see Adam, but don't look. Right? In a similar way that we learned yesterday, a man should not look, at the exposed legs of a woman when she's doing laundry. Okay, you might be able to see Adam, but it is inappropriate for you to see Adam, so don't look, says a divine voice to Rabbi Bena'a. Rabbi Bena'a said, but I need to mark the cave. He's not trying to look at Adam's form, but he needs to mark the burial cave so that other people won't walk above this cave, which is beneath the surface of the earth. And the voice said to him, As the measurements of the dimensions of the outer cave where Abraham is buried, so are the measurements of the dimensions of the inner cave where Adam is buried. So the Gemara, right? So in other words, the cave in which Abraham sits is the same size as the cave in which Adam sits. You don't have to get exact measurements. You're being told where they are. You don't need to enter. So the Gemara notes, and according to the one who says that the cave of Machpelah consists of two chambers, this one above that one, rather than two adjacent chambers. So according to that version of it, the voice said to Rabbi Bena'a, as the measurements of the dimensions of the upper cave where Abraham is buried, so are the measurements of the dimensions of the lower cave. And again, you don't need to measure it. So Rabbi Bena'a says, I gazed at Adam's two heels. Right? He didn't enter Adam's cave, but even from where he was standing, he was able to look inside Adam's cave, and it was like Adam's soul was lying there, or perhaps the preserved body. I mean, who knows? This was some kind of very mystical experience. And what Rabbi Bena'a says is that what he saw was just the two heels, suggesting that perhaps Adam was lying down, and only his heels were visible from where Rabbi Bena'a was standing. And he says that Adam's two heels shone so brightly that they are similar to two suns, like sun in the sky. So along these lines, the Gemara states that all people, all humans, compared to our matriarch Sarah, are like a monkey compared to a human, as she was so exceedingly beautiful. Sarah, compared to our mother Eve, right, the mother of all humanity, even Sarah, who's so beautiful, she makes all the people look like monkeys. But Eve is so beautiful that Sarah, compared to Eve, is like a monkey compared to a human. Eve, compared to Adam, is like a monkey compared to a human. Adam, compared to the divine presence, is like a monkey compared to a human. Right? And we learned elsewhere that when you talk about Adam and Eve, the original form of Adam and Eve was not, they looked like humans in the sense of a head, a torso, two arms, two legs. But their dwelling in the spiritual Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, the original Garden of Eden, was a mystical place that was as large as the solar system. Some unimaginable large place, occupying a huge space. Then there was the incident with the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then they took a form like ours, physical, corporeal, much more like us, the same size as us. So, if you're just talking about these comparisons, nevertheless, when they were reduced to, human flesh, human size, human like us, still their form was just like the ideal form of a human. Now, it was also stated that the beauty, now that we're talking about the beauty and handsomeness of humans, of particular humans, it was also stated that the beauty of Rav Kahana is a semblance of the beauty of Rav, and the beauty of Rav is a semblance of the beauty of Rabbi Abahu, and the beauty of Rabbi Abahu is a semblance of the beauty of Jacob, our forefather, and the beauty of Jacob, our forefather, is a semblance of the beauty of Adam, the first man. And on the topic of burial caves, the Gemara relates that there was a certain Magos. So a Magos was a Zoroastrian priest. Here now we're talking about in Bava, right? The Jewish community in the Persian Empire. And these Zoroastrian priests, were considered, according to Jewish law, as sorcerers who had to do with, rummaging through graves and disturbing dead bodies and whatnot. So there was this certain Magos, I guess in Persian and Amgusha, who was rummaging through the graves of the dead. And when he arrived at the burial cave of Rav Tovi Bar Matana, Rav Tovi grabbed him by his beard and would not release him. So this seems to indicate that you're talking about somebody who's been dead and buried in a cave for a while, and it's not some kind of mystical, probably not some kind of mystical soul-like presence, but something rather much more corporeal, maybe just a skeleton, maybe the body was better preserved than that, and he was dead and had been in that cave for a while, but let's say that the world of souls sent him back into his body on a mission, an angry mission, that, to what is this guy doing disturbing the dead? And so the body of Rav Tovi grabbed this Magos by his beard and would not release him. And Abaye came and said to Rav Tovi, I beg of you to release him. And the Magos came again in another year, and then he was released. So the Magos came again in another year, and Rav Tovi grabbed him by his beard. And Abaye came and requested that Rav Tovi release him. But this time Rav Tovi did not release him. And he could not get away from there until Abaye brought scissors and cut the beard of this Zoroastrian, sorcerer / priest, and then he left. New subject. The Gemara relates more incidents involving Rabbi Bena'a. So there was a certain individual who said to his family before he died, a barrel of earth to one of my sons, a barrel of bones to one of my sons, and a barrel of wads of wool to one of my sons. They didn't know what he was saying to them. So they came before Rabbi Bena'a for guidance. And Rabbi Bena'a said to them, do you have land that your father left as an inheritance? They said, yes. Do you have livestock that your father left as an inheritance? They said, yes. Do you have quilts that your father left as an inheritance? They said, yes. And he said to them, if so, this is what he said to you. He meant that he is bequeathing land to one son, livestock to the second, and quilts to the third. So he was able to interpret this cryptic message that the father had left in his will before he died. Now, there was a certain man who heard his wife saying to her daughter, why do you not act clandestinely when you engage in forbidden sexual intercourse? This is quite a family, right? So the daughter is married but cheating on her husband. The mother has been cheating on her husband, the girl's father. And the mother says to the daughter, look, if you have to cheat on your husband, why are you being blatant about it? You should do it discreetly, secretly, like I do. And this is what the mother says. Why do you not act clandestinely when you engage in forbidden sexual intercourse? That woman has, meaning herself, the mother is saying, I have 10 sons, and only one of them is from your father, and no one knows. Now, the thing is, her husband is overhearing his wife tell his daughter that, you should be more discreet in your affairs like I am. Your father has 10 sons by me, but only one of those sons are actually his, is actually his. The other 9 are from other men that I've had affairs with. And her husband has just heard her say that. Okay. So the mother is telling the daughter, you too should be careful so that no one will discover your illicit behavior. Well, she wasn't so careful now that her husband has overheard her say this. So having overheard that only one of his sons was really his son, when that man was dying, he said to his family, all of my property is left to one son. But he didn't know which of his sons is actually his son. He had no way of finding that out. So he just said, all of my property goes to one son. They know that he wanted all of his property to go to one son, but no one knows which son. They did not know to which of them he intended to leave his property. So they came before Rabbi Bena'a for guidance. And he said to the sons, go strike your father's grave until he rises and reveals to you which of you he left his property. So they all went to the grave, right? I guess to beat the grave with sticks to get the father, riled up so that he would actually rise from the grave and tell them which son he meant. But did all the sons go? No, they did not. 9 of them went. They all went, but one of his sons did not go, and that one, of course, was his son. The one that felt more attached to his father and thought that this would be a vile thing to do, to desecrate the grave, to strike it, to get their father to rise and tell them who he's leaving his property to. He would have no part of that. And Rabbi Bena'a said, all of the property belongs to this son who did not go and desecrate the grave. The other brothers became angry. They went and slandered Rabbi Bena'a in the king's house. And they said, there is one man among the Jews who removes money from people without witnesses and without any evidence. And the king's guards brought Rabbi Bena'a and imprisoned him. It sounds like this family was not a Jewish family, but they had heard that among the Jews, there's this wise man, Rabbi Bena'a. They went to him for advice, and they ended up not liking the advice that they got because it was actually great advice. It ended up producing the proper inheritance, that the son who really was the son got all the property. And, for dispensing good advice, what happened? He got slandered by Jew-hating type of slander. And now he's been arrested, right? Because by virtue of this advice, they're accusing him of passing judgment that is causing property to go from one person to another without evidence. So now the king's guards brought Rabbi Bena'a and imprisoned him. Now the wife of Rabbi Bena'a went and said to the guards, I had one servant. They cut off his head and skinned him and ate his flesh, and they fill him with water and give their friends to drink from him, and they have not paid me his value, nor have they rented him. They did not know what she was talking about. So they said, let us bring the wise man of the Jews and let him say what this woman is saying. So they called Rabbi Bena'a, and he said to them, she spoke to you of a water skin, meaning a goat skin. In other words, she was referring to a goat that she owned that was slaughtered, its meat was eaten, and its skin was made into a water skin that could be filled with drinking water. And they said, since he is so wise, right, and his acumen can penetrate into situations that other people can't figure out, since he is so wise, let him sit at the gate where the judges congregate and render judgment. Okay, now they're elevating him again. They're saying, well, since he's so wise, let's make use of him. Let him do what he does best and judge cases, not just for the Jews, but for the Persians in this city. So Rabbi Bena'a saw that it was written upon this gate, right, where the judges sit and pass judgment. It was written on the gate, quote, any judge who is summoned to judgment is not considered a judge, as judges must be above reproach. Right? So any judge who is sued in court loses his status as a judge, according to that saying. He said to them, if that is so, then if a person comes from elsewhere and summons a judge to judgment, has he disqualified the judge? Even if the judge was later to be exonerated? This doesn't make sense. Anybody could just level an accusation at a judge and disqualify him from serving on the judge's bench. Rather, what that quote should say on the gate is it should say any judge who is summoned to judgment and money is lawfully taken from him, i.e., he was ordered to return someone else's property, that man should not be considered a judge. So when they heard this, they wrote his addendum to the original inscription. But the elders of the Jews already say that any judge who is summoned to judgment and money is lawfully taken from him is not considered a judge. In other words, if a judge is found to be holding money that legally belongs to someone else, it wasn't just like they had a contract dispute and he had a point of view and they had a point of view and he ended up losing the case, but rather that it was found, that he was holding money that he should have known belonged to someone else and they legally extracted from him. This will now create a suspicion, well, what other money is he holding that he's not revealing, that he doesn't want to cough up? Maybe he's a judge that accepts bribes, and therefore he would be disqualified as a judge. Rabbi Bena'a also saw that it was written on the gate where the judges sit, at the head of all death am I, blood, i.e. people die from an excess of blood. And at the head of all life am I, wine, meaning that wine is what gives life. He said to them, your saying over here doesn't make sense. It's wrong. He said to them, if that is so, in the case of someone who falls from a roof and dies, or someone who falls from a palm tree and dies, was it his blood that killed him? He died because he fell. And furthermore, concerning someone who is on the way to death, can they give him a drink of wine and he will live? Rather, this is what should be written. At the head of all illness am I, blood. At the head of all healing am I, wine. And when they heard this, they wrote this addendum to the original inscription. But the elders of the Jews already were saying, at the head of all illness am I, blood. At the head of all healing am I, wine. And the Jews also say, in a place where there is no wine, herbs are required there as medicines. Having related that incident, the Gemara notes that at the entrance of Kapotekia, it was written Anpak, Anbag, Antal, which are all names for the same measurement. And what is Antal? It is a quarter log of the Torah. I don't know why they finished that discussion of Mishna number 6 with that, but that's what it finishes. Now we are on page 58b. We have been for a few paragraphs, and now we are going to open Mishnah number 7 here in chapter 3. So with regard to a spout protruding from one's roof gutter and draining water onto another person's property, so very easy to, if you ever walked around in an ancient city or like old city Jerusalem, buildings are right next to each other, and it will very often happen that the water that drains off of somebody's roof goes out a spout and into the courtyard of his neighbor, right? So that's the kind of thing that happens all the time in an old city. So what about this situation? So with regard to a spout protruding from one person's roof gutter, which drains water into somebody else's property, the owner of the spout has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, but he does have the means to establish an acquired privilege with regard to its place, as the Gemara will explain. Now, with regard to a gutter pipe that traverses the length of the roof, one does have the means to establish an acquired privilege for its use. In other words, if your gutter that runs along your roof collecting water is actually hanging over the airspace of your neighbor's property, well, if it's been there for a few years, you've acquired the privilege of keeping that gutter there, and he can't force you to move it. It's like you've got an easement through his space. Are you going to be can you also acquire the right, because it's been that way for years, to let your water drain through his courtyard? We haven't answered that yet. With regard to an Egyptian ladder, which is small and portable, one has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use. But with regard to a Tyrian ladder, which is large and fixed in place, one does have the means to establish an acquired privilege for its use. Just like a path through a field that the public has used for a long time, or that a neighbor has used because it makes his property accessible, and he's been doing that for years, he acquires that easement through the property. Well, within an old city, a ladder could acquire the same kind of usage because it really is a path between two places that people rely on. With regard to an Egyptian window, this means a very small window, so small that you can't even stick your head through it. One has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, but with regard to a Tyrian window, which is larger, one does have the means to establish an acquired privilege for its use. And what is the defining feature of an Egyptian window? It is any window that is so small a person's head is not able to fit inside it. And Rabbi Yehuda says if a window has a frame, even though a person's head is not able to fit inside it, one does have the means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, meaning that the neighbor can't block the window. That is Mishnah number 7. Now the Gemara. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the Mishnah's statement with regard to a spout, like a rain spout? Its owner has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, but he does have the means to establish an acquired privilege with regard to its place. So Rabbi Yehuda said that Shmuel said, this is what it is saying. Concerning a spout, its owner has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use with regard to one side, i.e., the owner of the field or the courtyard below has the right to move the spout from one place to another on one side of the roof, but it does not have the means to establish an acquired privilege concerning its place with regard to two sides, i.e. the owner of the field below does not have the right to move it to another side of the roof. He can point it a different way, but he can't really move it. Rabbi Hanina said, no, this is a different explanation. With regard to a spout, its owner has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its size, as if it were long, the owner of the field below may shorten it, but one does have the means to establish an acquired privilege with regard to its place, as if the owner of the field below comes to remove it entirely, he may not remove it. Right? The owner of the field or the courtyard below says, I don't want your water coming here. Okay, well, my water has to drain off my roof, and I have no other place to put it, and that's the way it's been draining for years. So, that's why you have a grate in the floor of your courtyard, because the water flows off my roof down to your courtyard and out that grate. That's the way it's been for years, and you can't seal up my spout because you don't want water coming down there, because then where will the water go from my roof? It won't drain, and my house will be flooded. So the guy below can't stop it. He could point it a different way. He could move it a little bit, but he can't stop it. Now, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said there is a different explanation. With regard to a spout, its owner has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, as if the owner of the field below wishes to build beneath it, he may build. Right, the guy below, maybe he wants to put a shed in his courtyard or in his field right below where that spout is. He can do that. The spout will still drain. It's going to have to now go over the roof of that shed, and it'll go down and around. What do you care? Your roof is still being drained. You're not going to tell me that I can't build under your spout in my field or in my courtyard. So of course he can do that. He may build, and the owner of the spout may not prevent him from doing so. But one does have the means to establish an acquired privilege with regard to its place, as if the owner of the field below comes to remove the spout entirely, he may not remove it. Now we're getting a start on page 59a. We learned in the Mishna that with regard to a gutter pipe, one does have the means to establish an acquired privilege for its use. Now granted, according to the one who says those first two explanations, i.e. Shmuel and Rabbi Hanina, well, it is well. The distinction between the law with regard to a spout and that of a gutter pipe is clear. Since the gutter pipe is fixed in place, there is an acquired privilege and it may not be moved or shortened. The gutter pipe is just moving through the air, along the building, and then the spout is kind of that down pipe with a little curve at the end that's gonna, where the water leaves, the gutter system, let's say. But according to Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, the one who says that the Mishna means that the owner of the field wishes to build beneath it, he may build. So what difference does it make to the owner of the gutter pipe if the owner of the field builds beneath it? Why would he have the right to prevent it? No water is leaving the gutter. The water only leaves through the spout. Why shouldn't the water flow through the gutter above somebody's building beneath it? What difference does it make? So the Gemara answers, here we are dealing with a gutter pipe that is made of stone and is built into the walls of the building. In a case where the owner of the gutter pipe said to the owner of the field, it is not amenable to me that you build beneath my gutter pipe, as my walls will weaken as a result. So Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says, with regard to a pipe from which water is draining into another person's courtyard, and the owner of the roof comes to seal his drainage pipe, the owner of the courtyard can prevent him from doing so. Now that's very interesting. We've been saying that the guy whose water is shedding off his roof, going through the gutter, down the spout, and into his neighbor's courtyard, which is the way it has drained perhaps for centuries. So his neighbor with the courtyard can't say to him, hey, I don't want your water coming through my courtyard anymore, because that's the way the water drains. So he can't stop the guy from, releasing his water through the spout into the courtyard. But what if the guy whose water comes off his roof down that spout says to himself, you know what? I don't want to waste this water. Why don't I capture this water? I'll make it so that my roof is kept very clean, and I'll have a little filtration system, and I'm going to capture all that water when it rains, and I'm going to put it in barrels. There's a coming drought. I want to have that water. And his neighbor said, no. Your water has been drained, the water from your roof has been draining into my courtyard for centuries, and I have an expectation that it will keep coming into my courtyard, and I'm going to capture it. Maybe it collected on your roof, but I have a right to continue to receive that water in my courtyard. Right? So Rabbi Yehuda says, as the owner of the field can, the courtyard below, can say to him, well, just as you have acquired my courtyard for the purpose of throwing your water into it, I have also acquired the water of your roof, and since I wish to use it, you may not seal the pipe. Now, it was stated, and I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. It was stated that there is a dispute with regard to this issue. As Rabbi Oshaya says, the owner of the courtyard can prevent the owner of the roof from sealing the pipe. Well, Rabbi Chama, Rabbi Oshaya's father, says he cannot prevent it. And Rabbi Oshaya went and asked Rabbi Chama's father, Rabbi Bena'a, and Rabbi Bena'a said to them, he can prevent it. Meaning the owner of the courtyard can prevent the owner of the roof from, keeping his water. And Rabbi Bar Chama read the verse about him, and if a man prevail against him that is alone, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. That's from Ecclesiastes 4:12, saying that this applies to Rabbi Oshaya, the son of Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Bena'a, 3 generations of Torah scholars in one family who knew one another and conversed with each other with regard to matters of halacha. Right? In other words, when you've got a multi-generational family of Torah scholars, they are going to be learned and wise indeed. And if you try to argue Torah law with them, you should not be surprised if you end up, finding out that you're wrong. Okay, let's take a few questions. Sharon, I had a vegetable grilling Talmud experience. When I lit the grill, there was a burst of flames, clearly a mouse nest. Wow. No evidence of any mice, but was that a sheretz in my grill? It was down by the flames, but does that render the grill impure? I believe, right? So we're talking about a dead creeping thing. A mouse would constitute a sheretz, and it would render a clay oven impure. And that would be a big problem because it was a clay oven that had become impure. You'd have to smash it if you were concerned about purity. I mean, obviously, we're talking about Tuma Tahara. In today's world, it's a different question than in their world, since, there's buried bodies all over the world, and we're all assumed to be in a state of Tuma. But to analyze the question, I'm assuming that your grill is made out of steel. Right? And if it's made out of steel, then you should be able to purify it with fire. And so with the heat that's created when the grill is closed and the fire is burning, and if you want it to be like extra sure, you bring one of those Chabad rabbis with the big blowtorch like they use to kasher an oven for Pesach, to be sure to remove all the chametz. That should take care of the tuma, even of a sheretz, because you can pass such items, either through boiling water or through fire, and therefore you should be able to purify it. But should you assume that it needs purification? Probably. Sharon, my understanding of the modesty of the priestly garments is not so much arms, but that when ascending the ramp of the temple, no body parts and legs and up were seen. Just so. We're not. I think they wore pants, but exactly right. It's not so much that you're going to be looking up, through some kind of a grate from below. But that even when they're walking, in terms of the priests, they had to exactly be very modest in what they would show. But although they did, obviously, they didn't wear gloves and they didn't wear shoes, right? So they walked around barefoot, which for people who have been in Jerusalem in January, February, it gets quite cold. So to be barefoot in the temple in those winter months was a real commitment for the Kohanim. Joseph, I was in an extended religious program for 3 years residentially. Keeping your personal space really does reflect your spiritual life. Just so, thank you. And Belle, this is some roller coaster of a daf. Clothes, tables, beds, graves, grave robbers, oh my. Right? That's what's so good. It reminded of the Forrest Gump, right? The daf is a box of chocolates. You'll never know what you're going to get. And this was definitely a colorful daf. That's what I've got for us today. May we all be blessed with a sweet, uplifting, refreshing Shabbos. May we go into it hearing only good news, and may we come out of it hearing only good news. We say amen.